Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show, Red Pill Edition. My name is Leon Jones, and in this segment, I want to talk about how the left is using racism to destroy this country. So, the title of this afternoon's video is The Left is Using Racism to Destroy This Country. Now, as you hear what is going on with all of these protests from Black Lives Matter and Antifa, you must realize that they are using black people. And of course, a number of black people aren't really paying attention to what's going on because a number of African Americans are in their feelings. And when it comes to Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they are in all of these Democratic cities to recruit voters for the Democrats. And if you look at what's going on right now, the corporations have caved in to this left-wing agenda. The Democratic politicians have caved in to this left-wing agenda. I know the education has also caved in to this left-wing agenda. The media has caved in to this left-wing agenda. And you have to look at where all of this is coming from. Again, it's coming from your colleges and universities because your colleges and universities have professors who promote hate. Now, you look at professors like Dr. Cornel West and Michael Eric Dyson. These old dinosaurs are nothing but race hustlers. These individuals talk about fascism. There's nobody more fascist than left-wingers. I mean, these left-wingers are taking down statues. They're even having packaging changed on Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's. What's coming next? Samoas, Eskimo pies, cream of wheat. All of this is to basically make blacks feel good. Well, here's what I'm going to tell you all about the left. The left is the racist. You look at all these Confederate statues. You look at the Ku Klux Klan. These were Democrats. So what the left is really doing is eating themselves, but what they're trying to do is pass the buck to the right. And they're doing that by silencing the right. If you look at social media, if there is a conservative point of view, the left wants to do everything to silence it. And they're doing it in the name of racism. There's nobody any more racist than the left. You look at Robert KKK Byrd, former Klans member. He was the senator from West Virginia. You look at Joe Biden. Again, I'm going to tell you all this. When he tells you African American people out there that if you don't vote for me, you're not black. And if you don't look at the 1994 crime bill where he calls black people predators and he says we got to get these predators off the streets, then you all need your heads examined. Because at the end of the day, these left-wing politicians do not care about you. They want to have more power over you. And if you look at what's going on in the neighborhoods, you have people like Cory Booker. He says he wants the protesters to continue to protest. But now here's the problem. When these protesters come into your neighborhoods as left-wingers, you all aren't going to like that. You all want to call the police. But at the end of the day, if there are no police around, what's going to happen? There's going to be anarchy. And again, the left is using any means necessary to employ the socialist agenda to this country. They don't like this country, but they are benefiting off this country. And the big problems that I'm having are with these white liberals. When you have people like Nancy Pelosi getting on one knee, they have a kente draped around them like they really care about African American people. Many of them don't like African American people, but they're using African American people for their own personal agenda. Again, Marxism is what these lefties want, but too many of us are too blind to see it. And what they're doing, they're using these young kids from Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Now, let me tell you something about Black Lives Matter right now. I'm not for that movement because the Black Lives Matter crowd is really undercover for feminism and LGBTQ, because the Black Lives Matter crowd was actually founded by a couple of black women who were lesbian themselves. And if you look at it, they're just using George Floyd, but they don't care anything about black men. In fact, if you look at what's going on when it comes to black people and crime, I don't see the Black Lives Matter crowd and the Antifa crowd going into black communities in Chicago and Baltimore and Los Angeles and Houston and Detroit and Milwaukee and St. Louis and in Indianapolis. I don't see these people. Why? Because their agenda is not black on black crime. Their agenda is to, number one, silence conservatives, number two, turn this country into a totalitarianistic type of government, feudalism. Well, we know that doesn't work because you cannot have lawlessness, because individuals are going to run rabbit. And at the end of the day, these protesters, who are basically kids themselves, don't understand anything that's going on. They're being paid by George Soros to destroy this country. But many of them don't see that. Let me tell you something. When it comes to the left, they're going to destroy each other. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how they're doing it now. You look at Olympia, Washington. Well, some of these protesters have moved into Olympia, Washington, and they're writing Black Lives Matter on residential homes. And people in Olympia, Washington, they're Democrats. Again, these individuals are coming for their own. And when you hear them say they want to defund police and take the money and put it into more social programs do not work. Social programs keep you poor. And you African American people who keep voting Democrats in power every election, you still find yourself poor economically, and you will always find yourself poor economically. Look, the left does not care about black people. In fact, I'm seeing more and more commercials talking about saluting Black Lives Matter. I'm a black person and I don't support Black Lives Matter. Yesterday was Juneteenth. I know what Juneteenth was, but I've never celebrated it. I know it was the emancipation of slavery in 1865, June 19th, 1865. But 90 years after that, there was Jim Crow. And who sponsored Jim Crow? Nobody other than the Democratic left. And see, the reason why the left is trying to destroy history is because they were part of this history. They want to erase it. They want to pretend that it never happened. But at the end of the day, you're not going to destroy everything, because if you take time to read, you're going to find out what all of these symbols meant. Now, I just saw a little piece off of Fox News where a statue of George Washington was torn down and burned with the American flag. Now, the American flag, as we know it, has 50 stars and 13 stripes. Well, again, if you look at what's going on, these lefties out here do not like America, and they are promoting their totalitarianism by disregarding everything. This is why they don't want President Trump in office. In fact, the left is saying that President Trump is not encouraging his supporters to practice social distancing. Well, what hypocrisy, because it was the protesters who didn't practice social distancing. And see, what these lefties are doing, They're utilizing double standards because they want to alleviate points of view that they don't agree with so they can implement the left-wing propaganda. Now, I want to caution everybody when it comes to these corporations want to control what you say and what you do as well. And I'm talking about the social corporations like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. When it comes to freedom of speech, these lefties don't want freedom of speech. They want their speech. They call it freedom of speech. They don't want the Second Amendment. Meanwhile, a number of them who have money, who are lefties, can provide their own security. And when it comes to left-wingers, they're using everybody who's on their side to try to destroy this country. And at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you this, Republicans. Your Republicans are allowing it to happen as well. You all want to be elected, but you're too cowardly. And why are you cowardly? You are afraid to be called a racist. Well, what you need to do is start calling out these lefties by utilizing the race card on them, because there is nobody more racist than a Democrat. And if you vote for a Democrat, for the most part, you're voting for a fascist, you're voting for a communist, you're voting for a socialist, you're voting for an America hater, you're voting for an individual who's utilizing identity politics. If you don't believe me, you look at people like Don Lemon and Anderson Cooper. You look at MSNBC. You look at all the major alphabet networks. These individuals are only using black people for their cause. And at the end of the day, black people keep following these institutions. In the African American community, you got Planned Parenthood. Look at Margaret Sanger. I believe she was also a Klan member. She's the one that established Planned Parenthood. Again, going back to Robert KKK Byrd. Joe Biden. Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton called African Americans predators. But African Americans are still going to go vote for these individuals who want to change this country. Now, wanting to take Aunt Jemima, wanting to take Uncle Ben's, possibly Cream of Wheat, and other brands that had black faces on them for the sake of offending black people is ludicrous. At the end of the day, these groups are very smart when it comes to black people, because they can get into black people's emotions, because a number of African American people are not very smart. They're very emotional. And black people, if you thumb this video down, you know you're going to be wrong, because many of you can't handle the truth. Many of you have been indoctrinated by these colleges. Many of you continue to watch TV. Many of you African Americans continue to be indoctrinated by these black pastors at church. These individuals, all they want to do is make money off of you African Americans. And if African American people got reparations, it's going to go back into the white community, because we're not going to take money and build our own communities. Now, I'm going to tell you, you really want to hear something controversial? I think this integration didn't work. I believe the integration that Lyndon B. Johnson wanted, Martin Luther King wanted. Now, Martin Luther King thought it was a mistake, but it was too late. It was a social experiment. It failed miserably. Segregation should be in place. Now, why do I say that? And I said this a long time ago. Because if you have segregation in place, that means we're forced to build our own communities. Because right now, many African Americans are riding on the coattails of white people. Many African Americans know they need white people. If you look at the DA, Paul Howard, down there in Atlanta, who charged a police officer with murder because he was doing his job. And then Keisha Bottoms down there in Atlanta and a lot of these other Democratic cities who have leadership that don't want police to do their jobs. They want to throw the book at the police. They don't like the police department. These Democratic politicians are cowards, and Republican politicians are also cowards. When it comes to leadership, they're encouraging the problem. Again, the Republicans are doing nothing, and the Democrats are doing nothing. And at the end of the day, if I'm going to protest to keep this country from going further and further to the left, it's time to go after the big wigs here. It's time to go after the corporations. And the big corporations you need to go after are your media conglomerates like CNN, ABC. You need to go after your colleges and universities. You need to go after people who are encouraging this takeover by the left to erase history through racism. Now what you're going to have is nothing more than a bunch of diversity hacks. There are going to be more and more courses that are going to lean to diversity in college. Again, when you look at some of these TV commercials, particularly if you go on any type of corporate sponsored TV commercial, you're going to see support Black Lives Matter. Again, Black Lives Matter doesn't support black men. Again, Black Lives Matter is supporting undercover feminism and LGBTQ. But they're getting funded by these companies. They're getting funded by the Democratic politicians, because my position on this is Black Lives Matter and Antifa are in these bigger cities to try to recruit Democratic politicians. But if you look at all of your big cities, they've been headed by Democratic politicians. And what do you see? You see poverty, the welfare state, single motherhood, bad schools. You see a lot of crime. But these Democrats don't care. And these Democrats know that African Americans are going to continue to vote for them no matter what. And at the end of the day, you got these lefties utilizing this George Floyd and this death of this Rayshard brother as another tool to institute leftist policies through racism. Now, let me tell you this, and some of you have heard it if you've been listening to the 401 Talk Zone radio show. Racism, as we know it, there's still some pockets of it. But many of us today have never seen real racism. Real racism is policies put into place where we have to sit at the back of the bus. We have to drink out of different water fountains. We have to go to different schools. What we see is identity politics. And the reason why identity politics is used is because when it comes to black people, identity politics gets to us emotionally. Again, you got people like D.L. Hughley, Michael Eric Dyson. You got people out there like Dr. Cornel West. You got all these professors out there in these African American departments. Mark Lamont Hill. Many of them don't care anything about black people. You got Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton. And at the end of the day, when it comes to us as African American people, we still have no power. And I don't care how much pandering is going on. The people who control us have the money. They have the resources. Meanwhile, we're being used. And many of us don't want to see that. Many of us as African Americans are in denial. The left is using us to employ left-wing tactics. And at the end of the day, when it comes to what's going on, many of us don't know what's going on. When you are having your communities burned down, that means you have to go somewhere else to get your goods. And at the end of the day, that's potential people who could have been working for African American businesses, because some businesses that were destroyed were African American businesses. But even if they weren't African American businesses, like a gas station or AutoZone or Wendy's, African Americans work in some of these places. So now they're out of a job. But too many of us as African Americans don't look at history. We don't know how to have any type of political communications with each other. We don't know how to disagree with each other. And the left is using our victimhood to keep us on the plantation. You see, brothers and sisters, the people who are enslaving us are the policies of the Democratic left. But I know many of you are going to get out there and vote for them, because when you hear the term racist, you get in your feelings and you become victims, and basically you don't have an idea of what racism is, because many of you have never seen racism. Many of us are comfortable as African Americans with where things are. But when an African American speaks his mind or her mind against the monolithic thinking, he or she is doomed or deemed a coon. But at the end of the day, the coons are ones who want to stay on a plantation and listen to all the filibustering and the bloviating by the Democratic left. And at the end of the day, we're going to continue to be where we are unless we get in the system. And I'm going to keep repeating this in future videos. What we need to do as African Americans, okay, you want to defund the police? Then what happens if they come up with a draft by saying, well, we need everybody to join the police department? What would some of you all do? And see, in the African American community, you need the police, because for the most part, this left-wing lunacy is not helping black-on-black crime. Again, you look at Chicago, you look at D.C., you look at Baltimore, Detroit, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Houston, Cincinnati. You look at your black churches, they failed African Americans, because all these people who are African Americans running these cities are all Democrats. They've basically stolen money. They basically have been corrupted or in corruption all their lives, and are utilizing the citizens for their own political gain. Again, you look at what's going on with D.A. Paul Howard in Atlanta. There was no due process for these officers. But at the end of the day, he's in an election. But again, when it comes to African Americans, we're allowing the Democratic left to utilize us as pawns. We're looking stupid. And many African Americans, they just don't know any better. In fact, the left, when you vote for them, you vote for poverty, which that means that's the welfare state. You vote for the LGBTQ, which many African Americans are against homosexuality. You vote for abortion. You vote for feminism. You vote for bad schools. In other words, you vote for more and more social programs that haven't benefited you. But when it comes to Black Lives Matter and Antifa, again, they're going out to these cities to try to recruit black people to vote for Democrats, because the Democrats need black voters. If the Democrats lose 10 to 15% of the black vote, the Republicans are going to win. But the Republicans know how to win without the black vote. But it's just an easier victory if you have the black vote. And you white people out there, you white liberals, enough with the pandering. I already know what you're about. You want to keep yourself in power. You want to tell black people how to think. You want to tell black people what to feel. And you're trying to tell them that your left-wing policies are going to create equality. In real life, there is no such thing as equality. There's equal opportunity, but not equal outcomes. Now, when it comes to you whites out there, stop apologizing for what happened. You see, when it comes to history, there are things that we don't want to be reminded of, but they actually happen. We just want to make sure that history is not repeated. And you black folk, if you're looking for reparations from Democrats, they're not going to give it to you, but they want to use us to push this left-wing agenda. And this left-wing agenda, of course, I call it Marxism. Right now it's cultural Marxism, but it's also part of Cloward and Pivens. And I explained Cloward and Pivens early in past videos, but what Cloward and Pivens does, it basically takes the system as we know it and it collapses it for something new. Now, what is that system? Well, the lefties in this country, particularly you millennials out there who have been indoctrinated by the media, you've been indoctrinated by social media, you've been indoctrinated by colleges, you want a socialist country. You believe in entitlement. You don't believe in family structure. A number of you out there do not like your parents. A number of you do not like the system because you've been told by Marxist professors that the system is bad. At the end of the day, if it was all bad, how have you all benefited? You have a number of lefties who are doing well out here. You even have a number of black people who are doing well out here. But the left-wing propaganda and the pandering to black people is going to destroy black people. We just haven't woken up yet, most of us. But when we wake up, it may be too late. But as African Americans, we cannot allow our communities to be destroyed. We can't allow ourselves to keep putting ourselves on a plantation that nobody cares about us. Heck, as African American people, we're doing well as individuals, but on the collective level, we're doing bad. We're at the bottom because we're not building anything. We don't have any power. We don't have any money. You see, when we talk about politics, you got to have organization. It's got to be well financed, and you have to have an agenda. And at the end of the day, the Black Lives Matter and Antifa, they're together now, but it won't be too long before they're fighting one another. Because really, what's going on out here is all about pushing a left-wing agenda to change this country into something that is totalitarian in nature. They don't want capitalism. But when it comes to defunding police, you cannot have chaos in this country and anarchy. We are a country of law and order. Lawlessness is not going to help people who want lawlessness. Because if something goes down, who are you going to call? You're going to call the police. There was one YouTuber who was on Tommy Sotomayor's video, trying to sue him, and guess who she called? She called the police. Police came out to her house twice. So at the end of the day, as African Americans, we need the police more than anyone because black on black crime is running rampant. And all we're doing is destroying each other. And Black Lives Matter does not care about black on black crime. We are being used as pawns, being pandered to, so we can stay on the plantation. Because the left-wing agenda doesn't want freedom of speech. They don't want Second Amendment. They want their speech. They want their way of doing things. They don't want families. And at the end of the day, all we're doing as African Americans, we're losing the battle. So at the end of the day, we as African Americans need to start rising up to our local and state politicians, and we need to get into the system as local and state politicians and judges. We need to get into college as teachers. We need to get in the media so we can change the narrative about us. Because at the end of the day, we're letting the people on the left who are white liberals tell us how to think. And what's happening, they're putting out false images and propaganda about us, because at the end of the day, these left-wingers want a society that is totalitarianism. And if you don't believe me, you look around. Because at the end of the day, my question to you African Americans is, do you want freedom or do you want totalitarianism? And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And also, if you want some science, technology, engineering, and math, please check out the Mind of STEM channel. On that channel, I'll give you overview about different science subjects like engineering, civil engineering, automotive, robotics, and more. Also, check out my Blog Talk radio show. You can catch me every weekend, and I'm going to get more into this when I do my Blog Talk radio show over the weekend. Now, my Blog Talk radio phone number is 215-383-5785. And if you can't find me on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, simply reach out to me on Facebook and Twitter. And at the end of the day, I'm going to leave you with this. Be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. To my African American brothers and sisters out there, please do not allow the leftist agenda to use us as pawns to keep us on a plantation. We're smarter than that. We cannot get in our feelings. And when it comes to black on black crime, we have to deal with black on black crime too, because the Democratic left does not care about us. They're your real racists. And what I'm doing in this video is giving you the light. Get an alternative view. Start reading for yourself. Because again, these lefties want to keep you on the plantation. Once again, thank you for listening. Once again, my name is Leon Jones. You have a wonderful and blessed day. God bless you. I'm out.